Okay, in this video or in this short lesson, we're just going to go through the process of factoring out monomials, but using the expanded form to help with any confusion that you may experience if this is your first time actually factoring out monomials. So basically, we want to find the greatest common factor for our coefficients. Our coefficients are the number that's in front of the variable. So we start there. We have to find the greatest common factor for those two. So if you think about the factors are the numbers that you multiply together to get the actual coefficient. So what numbers would you multiply to get 8? Usually 1 times 8 will give you 8, 2 times 4, 4 times 2, of course, and then that would be it, right? There's no other numbers that I can think of right now. And then what are the factors that will give you 16? 1 times 16, 2 times 8, 4 times 4, and we already have 2 times 8, so that would be 8 times 2. So the greatest common, well, 16 times 1 we already have also. The greatest common factor is actually 8. So we can factor out an 8 in this actual problem. Now, before we get to the factoring out using the greatest common factor, let's talk about these exponents in these variables and how this looks before we go ahead and factor out the coefficients. So this is what it actually looks like in expanded form. So we won't get confused going down the road and on the lesson. So 8x cubed, or 8x to the third power, is actually 8 times x times x times x. Okay, that's x to the third power. 8 times x to the third power. Now, what is 16x squared, or 16 times x is what 16x squared is, or 16 raised to the power of 2. So 16x times x times x. All right, so this is what it looks like in expanded form. So when you go to the process of factoring out your variables and the exponent, you have to find out how many of the variables are in common. What is the smallest number that they have in common? So in this case, they both have at least 2 x's, okay? So this is what you would factor out along with the greatest common factor between 8 and 16. Now I've already established that the greatest common factor between 8 and 16 is actually 8. So we can factor out the 8. And how many do they have in common? How many variables do they have in common? They have 2. So it'll be 8x squared, okay? So this is what will be factored out. Then you can put your parentheses, and then you go to the process of saying, what do I multiply 8x squared by to get 8x cubed, or 8x to the third power? What variable times 8x squared would give you 8x cubed? Of course, you should say x to the first power, because remember, 8x to the second power times x to the first power equals, let me move the board over a little bit here. It will be equal to 8x cubed, which is what you have in the original expression. So then we go and we have to ask the question, what do we multiply 8x squared by to get 16x squared? Well, since we have already factored out x squared here, you should not multiply any other variables here, because then it'll be x to the third power. So you don't have to multiply any other variables. But what do you multiply 8 by to get 16? And we would say, what will we say here? We'll say 2. We plus 2. And once again, you don't have to put a variable behind this because it is already at 16x squared, and we already factored out x squared. Then we can close our parentheses, and it is done. Now you can check your work, check your answer. Take a few seconds. It'll only take a few seconds for you to do. Take a few seconds to check to make sure that it matches up with the original 8x cubed plus 16x squared. Now let's do it now. So we multiply 8x squared times x to the first power. What do we get? We get 8x to the third power. 8x squared times 2. We'll get 16x squared. Okay, now I want to check, you want to check to make sure that's what we had in the original expression. 8x cubed plus 16x squared. Go back to it, and that's what we have right here. This is what we have right up here. So we know that we did it correctly. Okay. Okay, let's go and try one more if time permits. And let's see here. This one is going to be with 3 different terms, and we'll see if we can get this right. So we have 8x to the third plus 4x to the fifth plus 12x to the second. All right. So what is the greatest common factor between the coefficients? Well, first, let's go ahead and write this in expanded form before we do any of the greatest common factor. So what does 8x cubed look like? It looks like this in expanded form. 8 times x times x times x to the third power, x raised to the power of 3. And then we have 4 times x times x times x. How many of those x's do we need? We need 5 of them because it's x to the 5th power, right? And then 12x to the 2nd power. 12x to the 2nd power, that will be 12 times x times x. Now, look and see the smallest amount, or how many do they have, and how many does each one of these coefficients have in common for the variables? Well, 1 and 2. So when we factor out our greatest common factor, it's going to come with an x squared because all of them have at least x to the 2nd power. Okay, so what is the greatest common factor between 8, 4, and 12? Greatest common factor, anyone? All right, if you said 4, you would be correct. Okay, the answer is 4. So remember, we have to use those 2 x's now as x to the 2nd power. So when we factor out, it's actually going to be 4x to the 2nd power to start with. Okay, put your parentheses. And what do we multiply 4x to the 2nd power by to get 8x cubed? Well, we have to multiply it times 2x. All right, what do we multiply 4x to the 2nd power to get 4x to the 1, 2, 3, 4 to the 5th power? Well, we have to multiply that times x to the 3rd power, right? And what do we have to multiply 4x to the 2nd power to get 12x to the 2nd power? It would just be plus 3, right? Because we already factored out x squared, so we don't put an x squared behind the 3. That would make it x. It would make it 12x to the 4th if we did that. So this is the answer. And once again, you can check your work by actually multiplying. And we'll do that really quickly here. We'll go ahead and multiply all of the terms inside the parentheses times 4x squared, and let's do it now. 4x squared times 2x to the first is 8x to the 3rd, plus 4x squared times x cubed is 4x to the 5th, and then 4x squared times 3 is 12x squared. And we go and check and see, is that what we originally had? Is that what we originally had? Of course, this is what we originally had here. 8x cubed plus 4x to the 5th plus 12x squared. And that's it. All right, so this was an expanded version of this to give further clarity for anyone that may struggle with this actual concept. Till the next time, ma salama.